Blood in the Shadows. The wind howled through the streets of Haddonfield, carrying with it the crisp scent of autumn and decay. The once quiet town, scarred by its bloody history, buzzed with life. Halloween had arrived, bringing with it costumed children and the chaotic revelry of teens. But beneath it all, the town pulsed with a familiar dread. Michael Myers had returned. He stood motionless at the edge of the neighbourhood, a towering figure beneath the flickering streetlights. His cold, dead eyes stared out from the hollow sockets of his mask, watching, waiting. In his hand, his knife glistened faintly under the blood-red moon, its blade stained with the lives he'd already taken. Death was a ritual to him now, a part of who he was, and tonight, Haddonfield would drown in blood. At 1433 Avon Road, the Halloween party was in full swing. The house was packed with teens, their bodies pressed together in a mass of sweat and noise, oblivious to the lurking danger. Among them was Sarah, a goth girl with dark makeup and an air of disinterest, leaning against the wall as her eyes flicked restlessly over the crowd. The dim lighting cast her pale face in harsh shadows, making her look like she belonged more to the world of nightmares than this noisy gathering. She had felt uneasy for the past hour, like something was watching her. Something wrong. She couldn't shake the sensation. Outside, Michael moved through the yard, his boots crunching on the brittle leaves. He was a ghost, slipping between shadows with deadly purpose. The music throbbed from inside the house, but it was little more than a distant hum to him. His focus was singular: enter, kill, disappear. The back door was unlocked, an invitation to his blood-soaked work. As he stepped inside, the bodies moved around him, too absorbed in their fun to notice the spectre of death among them. He felt no rush, no excitement, just the steady, cold resolve that always drove him. His first kill was a girl in the kitchen, bent over a counter, pouring drinks. In a single motion, his blade sliced into the back of her neck, severing her spine. She crumpled soundlessly, her head hitting the counter with a dull thud. Blood pooled beneath her lifeless form, but Michael had already moved on, hunting his next prey. Sarah, still lingering in the living room, felt the icy chill of dread grow stronger. Something was wrong. She saw a shadow pass in the hallway, but when she looked, it was gone. Her heart pounded as her gaze flicked to the back door, open, swaying gently on its hinges. Her blood ran cold. "He's here," she whispered to herself, barely able to speak the words. Before she could scream a warning, the first real scream erupted from upstairs, a wet, gurgling sound that cut through the music. The crowd turned, confused, but Michael was already moving among them. He raised his knife, driving it into a boy's chest, twisting the blade with brutal precision. Blood sprayed across the room, painting the walls in crimson as the boy fell, his body spasming in its death throes. A girl tried to run, but Michael's knife found her too. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back as he slashed her throat. Her scream ended in a sickening gurgle as blood poured down her chest. Chaos erupted. Teens screamed and scrambled, their once carefree party now a scene of carnage. But for some, the horror had gone unnoticed. Upstairs in one of the bedrooms, the party was still raging in a very different way. A couple, entangled in the heat of passion, were oblivious to the bloodbath happening below. Mark, a cocky jock, had his girlfriend Tiffany pinned beneath him, her body arching as they lost themselves in each other. The pounding music drowned out everything else, the sounds of slaughter, the screams for help. Nothing reached them but their own gasps and moans. Michael moved silently up the stairs, his footsteps heavy but deliberate. The sound of the couple's lustful noises drew him closer. He paused at the doorway, the soft creak of the floorboards unnoticed as he watched them. Mark grunted, his body shivering with pleasure, while Tiffany's nails dug into his back. The room reeked of sweat and sex. The couple was locked in their own world, far removed from the terror Michael brought with him. Without hesitation, Michael crossed the room in 2 strides. His hand shot out, grabbing Mark by the back of his neck, lifting him like a rag doll. The jock's eyes went wide, confusion and fear washing over his face as he was ripped off his girlfriend. Michael held him in the air for a moment, savouring the helplessness in his eyes before driving his knife into Mark's back. the blade piercing his flesh with a sickening squelch. Blood gushed from the wound, splattering onto the bed and across Tiffany's bare body. Mark's body convulsed violently as Michael twisted the knife deeper, making sure every inch of the blade cut through muscle and bone. His spine snapped with a crack, and Mark went limp, his body dropping like a broken puppet onto the bed, drenching Tiffany in blood. Tiffany screamed, her voice raw and full of terror as she tried to scramble away, but the slickness of Mark's blood made her slip. She fell back into the bed, her wide, panicked eyes locking onto Michael's mask.
"Please, please,"
she whimpered, tears mixing with the blood splattered across her face. Michael stared at her, his head tilting slightly as if considering her plea, but mercy was not something he knew. He raised the knife high above his head. Tiffany's scream pierced the air just as the blade came down, plunging deep into her chest. She let out a choking gasp as blood filled her mouth. Michael stabbed again and again, each thrust more brutal than the last. Her body jerked with every impact, her cries growing weaker with each savage strike until she was nothing more than a lifeless, mutilated corpse. The once white sheets of the bed were now soaked with crimson, the bodies of the couple lying motionless in a grotesque tableau of carnage. Michael stood over them, his breathing slow and even, his work done, indifferent to the slaughter he had just performed, and turned to leave. Downstairs, Sarah ran through the front door, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath ragged. She didn't dare look back. The screams from inside the house echoed behind her as she sprinted down the dark street, her boots slapping against the pavement. But Michael was relentless. He followed her out into the night, his pace steady, his knife still wet with the blood of the couple he had left behind. The streets of Haddonfield were deserted now, the once busy Halloween festivities reduced to an eerie silence as the smell of death clung to the air. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached the Myers house. It was a sick twist of fate that led her here, but she had no other choice. She stumbled up the steps and threw open the door, slamming it behind her. Her lungs burned, her hands trembling as she locked it and backed away into the darkened room. The house felt alive with shadows and old horrors, the air thick with dust and rot. She grabbed a broken shard of glass from a cracked picture frame, her only defence against the unstoppable force that was coming for her. The front door groaned, the wood splintering as Michael's strength tore through it. Each heavy footstep sent fresh waves of terror crashing over her. He was coming. The door crashed open, and there he was, Michael Myers, the embodiment of pure, silent evil. His expressionless mask caught the dim light, the dark hollows of his eyes watching her without pity or hesitation. With a scream of desperation, Sarah lunged at him, swinging the shard of glass. It sliced across the side of his mask, but he didn't flinch. He grabbed her wrist, twisting until the glass fell from her hand. He brought the knife down. It plunged into her stomach with brutal force. Sarah's breath hitched, her hands clawing at the wound as her body crumpled to the floor. Blood soaked her shirt, pooling beneath her as her vision blurred. Michael stood over her, watching, tilting his head as if fascinated by her suffering. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving her bleeding and alone in the house where his darkness had been born. Outside, the blood-red moon watched over Haddonfield as Michael Myers once again disappeared into the shadows, searching for his next kill.